Yeah.
My name is Amita Kiley, and I'm interviewing Armand today for the Lawrence History Center. Can you say your name, Armand, for the record?
Yes, I've been able to say it for many years. Armand Michael Hyatt.
Great.
Okay, now we'll do it.
Go ahead and start it off.
Okay. Today's Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. My name is Amita Kiley. I'm the collections manager at the Lawrence History Center on 6 Essex Street in Lawrence, Massachusetts. I'm here with Mark Cutler, Vice President of the Lawrence History Center. Today we're interviewing attorney Armand Michael Hyatt at his office on 8 Jackson Court, Lawrence, Mass. And I'll stop and I'll let you sound check that one.
Yeah.
Wednesday, February 12th, 2020. My name is Amita Kiley, and I'm the collections manager and research coordinator at the Lawrence History Center on 6 Essex Street in Lawrence, Mass. I'm here with Mark Cutler, Vice President of the Lawrence History Center. Today we are interviewing attorney Armand Hyatt at his office on 8 Jackson Court in Lawrence, Mass. Armand is the recipient of the Lawrence History Center's 2020 Eartha Degler History Award. Since 1998, the History Center has given this award to outstanding leaders whose efforts and accomplishments help further our mission through their work in Lawrence. Good afternoon, Armand. Thank you for taking the time to be interviewed.
Mark?
For the record, will you please state your name and today's date?
Yes, I'm Armand Hyatt, and today is February 12th, 2020.
Thank you. So the purpose of today's interview is to get on record your story of growing up in Lawrence, the role your late father Wilbur Hyatt and your mother as well played in your life in regards to community service, faith, and living by the guiding principle, love with all your heart and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. I also hope you'll discuss your role in Early Community Development Corporation, Immigrant City Community Housing Corporation.
Yep.
And how that evolved into Lawrence Community Works. And toward the end, I would love to talk with you about some of your hobbies, such as music and poetry and sports, just to get a nice picture of the whole person that you are.
Okay.
So Armand, when and where were you born?
I was born at the time it was called Bon Secours Hospital in Methuen on June 10th, 1952.
And where did your family live when you were born?
Actually, when I was first born, we lived on Cross Street, near the junction of Broadway and Cross, for like 9 months before, and then we moved to Elm Street, right up in one of the 11 flats that were above the building that Manzi Electrical Corporation was in. My grandfather had that building built. My grandfather, Michele Manzi. Yeah, Michael Manzi.
Do you know about what year he had it built?
I don't, but I can take a picture. At home, I have the blueprint of the facade of the building. My cousin Albert gave me. He had two, and he has one, and I have one. It's a framed blueprint of the facade of that building, so I can take a picture of that and send it to you, and then maybe that might reveal something to you about the year.
Wonderful to have that.
Yeah.
Many people.
The first floor, which was Manzi Electrical Corporation, used to be my grandfather's restaurant, Napoli restaurant. It was, because he was from Queen which is a little village near Naples. So that's why the restaurant was called Napoli. Yeah. And Elm Street was, the Neapolitan section of most of the Italians from Lawrence were from Messina in Sicily, and that's like more Common Street, Newbury Street, but that stretch of Elm Street, Chestnut Street, and Oak Street between Jackson and Lawrence was the Neapolitan section. Yeah.
And the other half was more Arabic?
That's my mother's side.
Okay.
My father's side, when we first lived we were living with my father's mother on Cross Street, and she was from Syria, and my grandfather was also from Syria. He was from Haleb, which is Aleppo, and she was from Homs, Syria. So yeah.
Okay. Can you state your parents' names?
Yeah, my father Wilbur Abu Hyatt, and my mother Angelina Camilla Manzi.
When you lived on Elm Street, Street. How would you describe the neighborhood and what it was like growing up there? You can give as much detail as you'd like.
It was so welcoming and warm feeling. Everybody, it was relaxed. The Spike the Barber was down the street. You could go to different, candy stores. You could take one, or you could go a little bit further to go to there was one called Francis's, and then a little further down at the corner of Short Street was Frasca's. Gloria Chain Supermarket was at the corner of Elm and Lawrence Street, and across the street from that was the I can't even remember the name of the flower shop. It was a pretty well-known flower shop. I mean, I'm spacing out right now, but
maybe Rosebud.
yeah,
Okay,
Rosebud. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. And then on Lawrence Street there was Louis Liacono's. It was called Louis Liacono. It was his little market. The equivalent of a bodega today. And right next to him was DeFrancesco's, another one. And so, it was, everything was just really warm and friendly. In fact, Louis' son Vinny used to come to our house with a box on his shoulder and walk up the steps to our flat and deliver groceries to us. And that's, it had everything had that feeling of being connected with everybody else. It was a great sense of community.
That sounds wonderful. It sounds like community and home. I really think it seems played a strong role in your life's work.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I really, a lot of my cousins were there, lived nearby, and if not, they'd come over and play. And we would find ways to play. You might think, well, how could you play in a city? But there were lots of things we could do.
Yes.
Some of the things that we did nowadays, you'd never let a kid do.
Right.
But we used to log roll on top of the big wire reels, that the big wires, and so the wire reels themselves. So we used to climb up on top of them when they were empty, and we would log roll them. And that was we'd have to climb a fence to get to them to begin with. The Pacific Warehouse was the warehouse that Manzi Electrical Corporation used, and that was on Chestnut Street, right across from the St. Peter and Paul Church.
Yeah.
Right across from. So the back area of that was all just open stuff, and we used to climb and play in it. They never let the insurance companies would never let it. Never mind parents, but in those days everything was cool.
Yeah.
So and it was fun.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a little garbage shed that the garbage things were underneath this roof, and the roof wasn't much of a, it was just like a tar paper thing that was slung, and. But there was a pole that was holding somebody's piazza, porch, and so we'd climb up on the roof and then slide down the pole, And one time I fell through the roof because I didn't realize that the roof had didn't have enough support, so I fell right into a garbage can, But somehow we survived.
Yeah, and you have great memories.
Right, it was always fun. Yeah. There were pipes that we could shimmy up. And do the San Antonio family. Hugo San Antonio was he was on the WCCM. He was and his family, grew up. And they had Donna San Antonio was my age. Donna, yeah. And then Nadine was Martin's age. My brother, Father Martin, the priest at St. Basil's. Well, he's just 17 months younger than I am, and so Nadine was his age. So we were playing with them all the time and stuff too. Yeah.
Sounds like you made lasting friendships.
Absolutely.
With your childhood friends.
Right. It was great.
Yeah. You mentioned your brother, and I wanted to ask if you could tell me the names and ages of your siblings.
Yeah. So.
Or what order?
Yeah. So after me came Martin, who was born on. November 6th of 1953. Then my sister Nadima was born on June 12th of 1956. And then my brother Peter was born 60 years ago yesterday. He was born February 11th, 1960. In fact, his birth precipitated our moving out of Lawrence because once he was born, there's 4 kids.
Yes.
And we were living in a 2-bedroom flat.
Right.
So that's when we, scrambled, and by May we moved to this place on Bear Meadow Street in Methuen.
Okay.
But continuing on, Sophia, my sister Sophia was born on April 15th of 1963. And then my brother Francis was born on October 1st of 1966. And my brother Joseph was born on December 21st of 1968. So that should be 7. Oh, well, 6 siblings.
Right.
Yeah,
I have
okay.
that. And you said Joseph was 1968.
Yes,
What was that?
December 21st, 1968. Yep.
Right. How did you feel having all those siblings?
I loved it. I
Yeah.
thought it just felt natural,
Right,
and
built
it still does. We're very
Yeah.
close to this day.
Yes, I get the
Yeah.
strong sense of family from your story and
Yeah.
the legacy of your parents and your respect and admiration for them and
Yeah.
the kind of how you modeled your life after them.
Kinda,
everything.
yeah.
So,
Kinda.
so family is really a big theme I see in your life and
Very
in
much
your
so.
actions.
Yeah, my mother was the youngest of 11, and so she was close with her family, and that was and so I have like there were 56 first cousins.
Wow.
I'm one of 56 on my mother's side. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Just way fewer on my father, just a handful on my
Yeah.
father's side, but yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What school did you go to? in
St.
Lawrence?
Francis Grammar School.
Did your other siblings go there as well? The ones that were here when you lived in?
Except the last 2. Francis and Joseph went to St. Monica's in Methuen because things changed, and
Right.
I wasn't around, so I was gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I was. My brother was just a half a year old when my brother Joseph was only a half a year old when I left to go to BC.
Okay.
So I really, I went to college in the days of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So I didn't have too much awareness of what was going on, for that period of time.
Right.
So why they, but I know, and I also know that St. Francis kind of faded out of existence.
Yeah.
So, because that Lithuanian parish, right now Bellassini Academy is
Right.
there,
Yes.
in the church.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. How old were you again when you moved out of Lawrence?
8.
8 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. And you moved to Bear Meadow Road?
Bear Meadow Street,
Bear
yeah.
Meadow Street.
Uh-huh.
How did you feel leaving Lawrence?
Well, I didn't really feel like I was leaving Lawrence because, the Geruso, my cousin Johnny Geruso, they lived on Allen Terrace.
Oh.
And so we would walk, I still went to school at St. Francis.
Okay.
And sometimes we would walk over to Manzi Electric together,
Yeah.
Johnny and I, or sometimes we'd walk to his house. So, I felt I still was always like in Lawrence. Even sometimes going back to where I grew up because Manzi Electric was still there.
Right. I understand.
So we would, and sometimes we'd still go play over there. I made new friends in Methuen too, and and luckily there were kids my age there. So,
Yeah.
and luckily they liked sports, so we
Right.
really got into that. Helped me, as well, because I loved playing ball in the street.
Yeah.
And there was more room to do it
Yeah.
where we
Were you
were.
near the farm?
We're up the top of the hill, and there's a side street, Seneca Street, with no cars hardly ever go, so that
Okay.
became like a ball field for us.
So you
Yeah.
almost had a little bit of a trade to a more rural,
Yeah,
in a way, area, but not too far, luckily, from.
right, and where I was, and between going to school and Johnny, walking to Johnny's house, because Johnny was in my grade, so we were always together.
Yeah.
He's the one that the coach said, "Where's Geruso?"
Right.
Johnny was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you graduate 8th grade, or did you go to St. Francis's?
Yes,
All the way
through kindergarten through 8th grade,
What high school did you go to?
Central Catholic.
To Central.
Yeah.
Okay. experience at Central?
Well, I thought I thought they treated us a little, back then, because of Brother Marcel's tyrannical approach to discipline, I thought it was a little over the top, frankly. I mean, you couldn't, you had to have pockets that had slits on the side. They couldn't have like dungaree pockets or in the front. You couldn't have those kind of pockets. You couldn't have sideburns or hair over touching your ears, because they were afraid that we were going to turn into, the Beatles, or they would just, so he would just, he would have to run he'd literally run his hand up the back of your, back of your head, and if he didn't feel like the way a crew cut feels if it didn't have that tapered crew cut, then you could get jugged. You could get detention. It was unbelievably like they treated us. And if you got to school early, you couldn't even talk. If you got to school early, you had to just sit there and like study or whatever. But you couldn't, you weren't allowed to talk if you got there early. It was very, very strict. In some ways, maybe it paid off in terms of my, ability to adhere to authority figures. So, and I grew up with my parents. The attitude my parents had is, the teacher's always right. The teacher's always right, no matter what. I don't want to hear it. Just do what you're told. That's the way I grew up. So, I complied.
Right. Did you choose to go to Central, or did your family for the?
I can't remember.
In keeping with your faith, or was it?
Yeah, there might have been a little bit of the faith aspect to it. That's why I wasn't born in Lawrence, because Bon Secours was a hospital run by the nuns.
Right.
So they, my mother definitely had the, connection. One of her sisters became a Poor Clare nun. Okay. And she was very devoted. She named my brother Martin after, at the time, Blessed Martin de Porres of Lima, Peru. Because she had such a devotion to Blessed Martin, who later became a saint. And I was like, well, Martin, you were named after somebody who became a saint, and you became a priest, and it made of, but it was a very, definitely a lot of faith involved. But, I think it might have had to do with education as well, because my father was like, you're going to do well. You're going to, you're going to get the best education you can, and I wasn't going to, fight it. I mean, I think I can't remember when, maybe 8th grade, that I read, To Kill a Mockingbird, and I was like, I felt like, wow, my father's like Atticus Finch, because he fights for the underdog, And so that was really, so I had a huge amount of respect for my father.
Oh, yes, and that's what I want to definitely ask you about and get on record, because he was an incredible man, and his legacy to the city will go forever with who he's helping, and those people will help. And
I think so, yeah.
So I'd like to ask you, I guess at this point, if you could talk about your father a little bit.
Sure.
You can, or as long as you want, not just a little bit.
He used to drive the Gerussos, the Tullys, and the Hyatts to school at St. Francis, and in a big station wagon, in which now they'd pull him over and put him in jail because we were all packed in like sardines. No seat, and a big station wagon with people piled in the back. And he made us sing he made us sing the whole way there. We'd have to sing, "Heart of my heart, how I love that melody," or "Down by the old, not the new, but the old mill stream, not the river, but the stream." We'd have to sing songs like that. And then he taught us a few the funny ones, like Riley the Cop was a funny one. It takes too long to sing to get the funny part. There's that Luigi, when Luigi starts singing, it's pretty funny. "Please no squeeze it a banana, 'cause when you do that, then you make them flat." That's so he had us. The kids got into it. We liked it. My father loved to sing, and he kind of passed that along. So there was that aspect of it. He had an amazing energy, and he was centered around doing the right thing. It was just like, you do the right thing. I don't want any excuses. And he never would, he was never about excuses.
Right.
I remember one time, you know, like we knocked a cup on the floor, and it's like, you know, what happened? What just happened? It broke. He said, it broke, or you broke it.
Right.
You know, like he wouldn't let you. Yeah, he was about taking responsibility for things. You know, he wasn't going to be mad at you that it broke,
Right.
but he'd be mad at you for not taking responsibility for breaking it. That's all. It's just, you know, just say it like it is. And he had that way about him.
Yeah.
And he was one of the people who founded Lazarus House.
Right, I wanted to know more about that for the
Yeah.
record.
I don't know a whole lot about that because I was away at school and stuff.
Right.
I was in my surfing days probably then. But you know, I know that he and Brother Tom Petit, you know, he did some things, and I remember that there was this. I remember something. My brother Martin would remember better actually. You could probably call him and get the story, or I could call him and then email it to you. But I remember there was something about. I can't remember what. There was a public hearing, and people were trying to fight with the idea of having homeless people stay there, and I can't remember. It was almost like a brilliant stroke that he had to persuasively make it, you know, convince the city to allow it, and they did. And so, you know, he was just out there fighting for, you know, the underdog, like Atticus Finch, you know. Yeah. So, you know, and I knew that about him, and I knew that before that too, because he, you know, the cases that he would take, you know. I mean, I wrote my father's obituary, and I remember saying in the obituary, you know, when you came into my father's office, it didn't matter you were prince or pauper. You treated the same way, and he made everybody feel like they were sitting at his kitchen table. You know, that's the thing about my father. He made everybody feel. And there was a great deal of hospitality. His mother, coming from Syria, you couldn't possibly go into that house without having, you know, a ton of food put in front of you. You can eat, come on, eat. You have to, you know. So he had that same way about him, you know.
Do you know if that's what led him into law, why he wanted to be a lawyer? Was it a sense of wanting to help people, or did he ever really say? I
don't know. All I know is he learned to speak English at the Tarbox School.
Right, I
you know.
That. Wow.
Yeah, he and so I think that, you know, I think making something of himself, like he was such a great swimmer, and, you know, and he was a lifeguard at the Kennedy Pool, which is in the park, what used to be in the parking lot of Central Catholic. It was the Kennedy Pool, and he was so good that they moved him to, you know, to the beach, and he was a beach lifeguard because he swam like Johnny Weissmuller. He really did. I always loved watching Tarzan movies because my father swam just like him. I don't, but he did. My brother Peter does too. But
especially to fight the currents and the tides.
He used to swim the circumference of Shadow Lake in Salem, New Hampshire. You know, at the beginning of the year, at the end, he'd swim the circumference. Like, to me, swimming across was an accomplishment. And he'd swim but he was always about, you know, just doing things and getting to the best. Like if he's going to be a lifeguard, okay, he's going to be the best lifeguard that they, you know, and ending up at the beach. And I think the same thing was true. Like, okay, if I'm going to get educated, I'm going to get educated and do something with it. I think that was it. And probably he was just attracted to the law because he had a sense of justice, I guess. I never even asked him that.
Yeah, it just sounds like he was born that way. And, just with that strong sense of fairness and justice and wanting to help.
No question.
And being a lawyer, he could really make a difference that way.
Right, I think so. And you know, in Lawrence at that time, all the lawyers were in the Bay State building. Before the, what was the Arcity building, which then became the 101 building. You know, the 101 Amesbury Street?
Yes.
Yeah, that was built by Dr. Arcity, and it was called the Arcity building, and some of the lawyers moved there, but prior to that, they were all in the Bay State building. All the lawyers were in the Bay State building, and my father included. When I got back from University of San Diego School of Law, we were in the Bay State building, and then Dr. DeCesar was selling his place on 57 Jackson Street, and I said, and I signed a P&S to buy it, and I said, Dad, you know, I'm going to find a way to buy this, but I think you should, and we'll move there. And he did. So we moved to there, but it had no parking.
Okay.
So then when this came available for sale, I was like, you know, I knew that there was a, you know, and I didn't really want to leave being right on the common. I loved being right on the common, but you know, being set back was kind of nice too, and having the parking was huge.
Right. What year was it? When you
I bought it, I think, in like '83, maybe, and I held it. 82 or '83. I bought it and I held it for 2 years, and you know, like homeless people were living in
I
it.
was going to ask who was in here.
Yeah, it was vacant, and there were homeless people living in it, and that was okay with me. I figured they're not going to do any harm.
Right.
But at one point, this mantle was on the floor. They must have pried it down to see if they could find money hidden or something or whatever. And at that point, I was like, oh, I don't want to.
Lose
This,
all this
yeah.
money.
So at that point, I came in and I kicked everybody. You know, I had to be in court that morning. I had a suit on, and I remember coming in and telling people they had to leave, and you know, which was maybe stupid on my part. But there was only one guy actually in the building at that time, because they would get up and go out. But
Did you know their names or anything?
no, I didn't know.
It
No,
wasn't like
I only. Let me tell you something. I live on a need-to-know basis.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
I know so little beyond the periphery of what's in my universe. I just can't keep track.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
And then once my wife canceled the Boston Globe about, you know, because my kids were like, Dad should read that online, and I'm like, I'm not going to read it online.
Right.
She canceled the Globe probably, you know, about 8 years ago,
Yep.
and I've been oblivious to the news ever since.
You might be better off.
I just figured, you know, at some point in your life you have a been there, done that attitude about things. Like I don't watch TV anymore, except ball games, and even those I won't watch any game, not even a Super Bowl, even when the Patriots are. I won't watch it until like at least an hour and a half later, so I can fast forward through all the bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's saying, "Oh, did you see Shakira and J-Lo?" And I'm like, "No, how am I going to see that?" What? You know, no, I just watched. I watched. Well,
yeah, maybe not that short.
not quite, but yeah. Anyway, so but I don't. You know, I think the last TV show I saw was Curb Your Enthusiasm years back, and then I. But I just stopped. I kind of like hit a wall. Like, okay, I'm done.
Right.
But between writing, I like to write poems, and I've written a musical, and I like to write stuff, and. Between that, and I also like to pass time with crossword puzzles and Sudoku and you know, stuff like cryptic quotes and stuff like that.
What is your musical? Can you tell us about that? The musical, if you want to.
Yeah, well, I mean that's.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean I don't know if it's ever gonna, you know, make it anywhere. If you guys have connections, we can make it happen. Yeah, I've been involved with Warren Manzi as you know, the executive producer of Perfect Crime. You know, and I could probably give you some Perfect Crime stuff up, because Warren is. Perfect Crime has become the longest-running non-musical play in the history of New York theater. Yeah, and I actually have a clip of me and the general manager, and I let my daughter was working in New York. She came. You know the closing bell. You bring the gavel down. They have like the closing thing. I brought the gavel down on Wall Street once because of the executive producer of Perfect Crime, because the city dedicated a certain day, Perfect Crime Day, on our 30th year anniversary of the show. It's been running since 1987.
Wow.
It's the longest running non-musical play in the history of New York theater, and it's written by Warren Manzi.
Wow.
You know, and because when it first started, we just opened in the Village in a little thing, in a little small little basement theater, and they didn't have. You know, so I did the contracts, you know, with the theater owner, with Actors Equity, with all that stuff, and I pulled a few bucks together. It was like less than $60,000 to produce it. So Warren said to me, "Armand, you're the executive producer." I said, "I'm not. I don't know anything about theater." He said, "You just did what the executive producer does. You're the executive producer." I said, "All right." Which means I'm on the hook with Equity, though. But anyway, so after all these years, never made a nickel. And I was like, you know, it runs, but, you know, meanwhile, money is being made hand over fist for singing, dancing animals like cats in The Lion King. So I was like, I'm going to give people what they want. I'm going to give them singing, dancing animals. So I came up with this idea to have a musical based on Aesop's fables. And I thought, how would I do that? So then I came up with the idea. So I wrote a play, and at the end of each scene is punctuated by a fable that sort of relates back to that theme. And the fables are all told musically, but the play isn't. So it's not a musical where in the middle of the thing somebody's singing and stuff like that. I've never even seen The Sound of Music because I just couldn't. I feel like if you can tell me the story in 15 minutes, don't make me sit there for 2 hours. That's how I've always felt. So, but this is different. This is about bringing musical, each fable is musically told. So I wrote a bunch of, and I borrowed musical themes from Byzantine liturgies and things like that that have always been so like hauntingly beautiful to me, and I adapted them so that I think it's going to be pretty good. But I started it in almost. I mean, I did it in 2005 is when I started it, and I was done with the first draft. I don't know when I submitted the copyright. After that, my cousin Jeffrey, who is involved in theater. And has been, when he read it, he said, I need to see a scene of Alana and her cat. Her cat is named Aesop. Wow. And so I wrote another scene, which means I wrote another fable. But that isn't in the original copyright, but that I submitted to Washington. But I'm going to do that. I just want to get it like totally done with all the scores. I have the right hand scores, but you need chords. I found out because we did do a workshop in New York. And they focused on the play. And I was like, they didn't focus on the musicality of it. And I'm like, the play was just an excuse to have the musicals, So anyway, whatever. Right. Blah, blah, blah. I better shut up because this is going to go,
I should have asked you earlier, but can you share your wife's name and your children and grandchildren?
Absolutely.
It made me think of that when you said you don't have time for TV and newspapers. You have a wonderful family.
I met Karen when I was going to law school at the University of San Diego.
And did you choose out there for surfing?
Yes, absolutely. I went to BC. While I was at BC, I was like driving to New London and taking the ferry over to get to Montauk Point so I could surf at Montauk. And between that and Hampton, I was like, this is I'm going to law school in San Diego. So.
Thank goodness you did.
I know, yeah. So I met Karen there, and then she came back here, she only had one brother, and she didn't really have like a family, cousins. It wasn't that bad for her to come here, except that she hates mosquitoes. But So Karen, her last name was Rubel, Ruebel, and then we have 4 children. Brett, Gianna, and Brett was born. Do you want their ages?
Why don't I take them? I think I have them, but I'll take them.
Okay, Brett was born on June 23rd, 1978. Which was exactly 364 days after we got married.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice anniversary
gift.
gift.
And then Wesley Therese Hyatt was born on July 12th of 1981. And Wilbur Alexander Hyatt, so he still has my father's middle initial. He's Wilbur A. Hyatt, just like my father, only instead of Abu, it's Alexander, because Karen's father's middle name was Alexander. Nice. So it worked out nice. Yeah. So Wilbur Alexander Hyatt was born on January 10th of 1985. And then Sophia Antonia was born on December 7th, Larry Bird's birthday, of 1990.
Okay. And you have, is it 2 grandchildren?
We have 2 grandsons. My daughter Brett is married, and she has a son, Gavin, who will turn 5 on May 13th.
Wow.
hmm
So,
So he's born.
kindergarten next year.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I guess so, right.
Yeah.
And then Will, my son Will, as a son named Armand. He was born on September 29th of, let's see, 2 years. He turned 2 last year, and last year was 19, so it's 17. 17. So Gavin's 15, was born at 5, 13, 15, and Armand is 9, 29, 17.
You have a wonderful memory for dates.
Well,
I don't know if you've ever, so anyone's told you about you
oh,
for all your siblings.
well, I better know those dates,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Did you
I know Johnny Gerusso's birthday too.
did you go to church growing up? Your family?
Yes, I was an altar boy. Went to St. Francis.
Okay, I went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were very much, even though my father's, Melkite Catholic, which is the Byzantine, not Roman, but Byzantine.
Right.
I grew up serving at the Roman Catholic Church, because St. Francis Church was a Lithuanian church.
Yeah. So I think I'll switch topics a little bit and ask about your work with the Immigrant City Community Housing Corporation, and just kind of ask about where were you in life at that time?
Yeah.
Where did you live? What were the circumstances that brought up the need for this?
Yeah, well, when I first got back from San Diego, I was living in a winter rental at the beach, so I could surf.
What year would this have been?
I graduated in '76, so I came back, and from '76 through, but then I got a house. I bought a house. I wanted to buy a house at the beach, but I couldn't pull it. So I started at the mouth of the river. I bought a place on the river in Amesbury.
Okay.
It's tidal, so I can, I felt connected, and I'm close. I'd have to go to the highway. And so I'm living in Amesbury, but I'm coming to Lawrence every day. I spent my awake time in Lawrence.
Yeah.
And I was doing consumer cases for the Greater Lawrence Community Action Council. They would refer cases to outside counsel, and they found somebody who was willing to do it for peanuts. So
What does that mean, consumer cases?
like somebody bought a lemon, a car that's a lemon,
and they wanted to-
or somebody who's being mistreated as a tenant, in a landlord-tenant, any kind of a consumer situation. So they had a consumer department, a consumer protection department, and so Isabel, I knew Isabel because my father was her lawyer, and my father also actually was one of the helped found Semana Hispana. I forgot about that.
Right, I wouldn't.
That's right. I forgot all about that. Yeah. So Freddie Santiago and Isabel Melendez, and my father was always helping them in whatever they were doing.
Say Freddie was Isabel's father or husband? Or
I don't. Friend. I don't even.
Okay.
I'm not imputing. Definitely not a relative.
Okay. But
Whether
you
or not
said-
they had a relationship,
okay.
I don't know.
You said your father was whose lawyer, though, to Isabel?
He was both of their lawyers.
Oh, okay, he was their lawyer.
Yeah, he was their lawyers whatever they had going on.
needed something.
Freddie was a businessman. He was a wheeler and dealer, and he was making things happen. He started a softball league.
Yeah.
He, and my father would do whatever he needed to do. And one of the things he did was help them establish Semana Hispana. I think there's something hanging on a wall that says something about that.
Okay.
Or if not, it's buried somewhere. I can find it.
So he
I've never
provided
hung one of my things on the wall. I'm just like, but there's a perfect crime. There's the proclamation from the mayor of New York right out there. Yeah.
But he was kind of their legal counsel for
Yeah, he would do stuff like that. So I got to know Isabel.
Okay.
And Isabel would come visit. Like my parents would always rent a place at the beach for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That
At
was
Salisbury?
Yeah, Salisbury, and that's how I started surfing. My father one day went to Al's Rod and Gun Shop Remember that? On the corner of Broadway near, and he picked up a surfboard and just brought it. And I was 13. I had no idea. This was 1965. We were going there for the last 2 weeks of August for the beach, and so he brought a surfboard along. He's like, yeah, I thought we did, and I became hooked on surfing. Yeah. So, but so Isabel would come visit at the beach, and so I got to know Isabel, and you know, and she told me that about this organization that had already been formed. I didn't form it. Immigrant City Community Housing Corporation, and that they were wanting to build housing on the North Common site.
Who had formed that organization?
I don't remember, but Leonard Raymond was the president of it. Leonard F. Raymond was the president of Immigrant City, so he might have had something to do with forming it. I came in shortly after it was formed, and there was another lawyer on it, and I think his name was David something. You might remember.
You can look it up.
Yeah. And what the heck was anyway, but that lawyer kind of faded out of the picture, and so things started falling more and more on me. And then also once the LRA kind of, you know, tried to put the kibosh on, you know,
so the Lawrence Redevelopment Authority.
Right, the Lawrence Redevelopment Authority. They teamed up with, you know, they were in cahoots with the city council and the mayor's office at the time. I think it might have been. Kevin Sullivan.
Okay.
Kevin Sullivan, not Michael Sullivan. His brother. Remember, his brother was. And there's a headline in the Tribune that says, "Mayor, City Council score victory."
I just read that in Donna's book.
As low-income housing banned from North Common, and they only were able to get the urban renewal plan based upon the fact that they were going to provide replacement housing for the people they displaced.
Right.
So it's like, what do you mean you ban? You know, they held a public hearing. I got it. They held a public. Is this still working?
Yeah.
They held a public hearing. You know, because if you hold a public hearing, you can amend the urban renewal plan. So they amended the urban renewal plan so as to exit out, and then the LRA held an RFP, and they went forward and they selected the Azadorian brothers to build what was going to be like ranch houses. Ranch houses on the north. That's what was planned. Okay, they believed that Essex Street, the Lawrence strategy was involved with Nick Rizzo. Okay, you know him. He went to jail for stealing from Tsongas when Tsongas made him his money. You know, and the Lawrence strategy convinced all of Essex Street, Bob Azadorian and McCartney's and Caps. The Lawrence strategy convinced them that the reason Essex Street was failing was because of the influx of Latinos.
Right.
Instead of the obvious reason that people want to go park their car at the mall and shop. You know, the Methuen Mall had opened up, and people were going to the Methuen Mall to shop because they could park. Okay? And it was a whole different, you know, the people weren't walking as much into downtown. So that's really what the problem was. But they were painting it like, oh, we have to make sure we get rid of this low-income component because otherwise Essex Street's going to be damned and, you know, doomed. So they granted the Azadorian brothers the winning bid, and they were going to go forward. So we teamed up with Len Raymond, who I said was the president. He really knew his shit. I didn't know it. I knew how to, like, tell me what to do. Tell me what you need done, and I'll find a way to get it done. But Len, like, had a bigger picture understanding of what needed to be done. And so, you know, he was like, he knew of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Justice, so he put me together with them, and we drafted a complaint that was like that thick, which included statements from displaced residents saying that they were expecting to wanting to move back. And we it was ready to be filed in federal court, and we plunked it on the city's desk and said, "This is getting filed if you don't undo the mess you've done."
Right.
And they realized that they were screwed because it was, it laid it out. And Immigrant City Community Housing Corporation and the 12 affiants were all plaintiffs. Okay?
Yes.
Because our mission made us a legitimate plaintiff. The mission of that corporation made us a legitimate plaintiff, and we also had these 12 affiants who were plaintiffs as well, because they were harmed by virtue of this illegal action.
Do you know if when they had the public hearing, were these residents notified, or, I mean, it sounds like they would be...
I think the only notification came by newspaper. Right, a legal notice. Right. So, and they railroaded it through anyway.
Right,
so it says, but I mean, they let people talk and they nodded and then they did what they wanted to do.
That was just a formality.
Right. But so based on that thing, they voided the original process and they reopened the process, and we got the bid. Immigrant City got the bid. And we had to team up with somebody, so we teamed up with a CDC, a Community Development Corporation in Boston. At the time they were called Greater Boston Community Development Corporation. They're now called the Community Builders. Okay? And we teamed up with them because we needed, that opens up the door to additional kinds of financing opportunities, et cetera. And so we were able to go forward, and the city put us through holy hell. The land disposition agreement that we had to go through, nobody has to go through anything that traumatic. And, they pushed us into a time frame when it was really even more difficult. Do you remember, like in 1990, there was a joke going around? And the joke was, 3 of these things are just like the other, and 1 of these things does not belong. Can you guess which one? Remember that Sesame Street thing? Okay. So the 3 of these things that don't get, so it was like herpes, gonorrhea, AIDS, or a condominium in Hull. Which one doesn't belong? And the answer was gonorrhea, because you can get rid of that. Okay? You couldn't, real estate just hit, and we were confronted with trying to get financing in those days, and it was really, really difficult. And it's because the city, we went through like a 1.5-year process to get a land disposition agreement with it. It was that thick. Normally they're like 12 pages. Ours was like 100 and some odd.
What made you keep fighting?
We weren't going to stop. What made us keep fighting? There was no way we were going to stop. I mean, going back to my father, my father would never, you don't quit anything. You just do what you have to do. So
who else? It was you, Isabel Melendez. Do you remember some of the other names?
Isabel, myself, Len Raymond, Reverend James Keller, who was a Protestant minister. There was a Catholic priest who was the pastor of St. Mary's, Father Robert Gussetto. There was a guy who lived in Lawrence, Patrick Smith. And then later on, towards the end of the process, Attorney Charlie Crowley, his daughter Eileen married Larry Lefebvre. I don't know if Eileen Crowley.
Collection at the archives.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he was on there too at the end. He came in sort of to the tail end after we had gotten, but he was a good man. His heart was definitely in the right place, and I think he was quoted in one of the newspaper articles saying, "I'm ashamed of you," to the councilors for what they were trying to do.
Would you say the general consensus outside of city government and your team, just people who were sort of on the peripheral, did they have size, or would you say they were?
Would they have what?
Would you say they agreed with your fight, or did they kind of have that same feeling that if the minorities would leave, that the city would have a renaissance if they were to able? Or did you have a sense of what the community?
It was divided. It was divided. There were the people who had the inclinations to feel like we're being polluted by an influx of first of all, they called everybody Puerto Ricans.
Right, right.
Whether they were Dominican or not, they called them Puerto Ricans.
Yeah.
They thought everybody was Puerto Rican. And by the way, there was also Jacques Fournier from Lower Tower Hill who was on there too. Jacques Fournier. I don't want to leave. Oh, and Modesto Maldonado.
Oh,
Yeah, Modesto Maldonado was also on there. I'm sorry, I don't want to.
some of these names.
And there was another woman, and I can't remember her name, but she's in a picture that we have. Actually, there's a picture that's included in that composite thing that the LCW tribute of the bunch of us standing there with the thing in the background. That woman, I don't know. One is Isabel, and there's another woman.
Yeah, we can go back and.
I can't remember her name.
and make sure.
It's so much I can't remember.
Right,
I'm doing the best I can.
Oh no, this is wonderful because there's always sources we can fill in the gaps with. And so you ultimately won this battle.
We ultimately won, and then once we did, Len Raymond, being the visionary that he is and the knowledgeable person, because he used to work he was actually the community development director in Portsmouth, New Hampshire for a while, and he worked in the city here in Lawrence in the community development department. So he had a better understanding. He said we should form our own CDC. And so we did, and we called it Heritage Commons CDC.
What year was that?
1986.
And how long did Heritage Commons last before it? Was that the precursor to Lawrence Community Work?
It still exists as Lawrence Community Work.
Right.
Its name changed. A group of directors thought they wanted the name Lawrence in there, so they changed it to the Lawrence Neighborhood and Planning Redevelopment Corp., which was too wordy. So that when Bill Traynor and Jess Andors and Tamar and Kristen came along, they were like, we need to really simplify. So we came up with Lawrence Community Works.
Is that the early 2000s?
1999 is when they all came in, and by early it was either 2000 or 2001 that we changed the name to Lawrence Community Works. Yeah.
Did you? Well, I shouldn't say did you ever, but the growth that you've seen from starting up small with the fight with Isabel Melendez to now, can you talk a little bit about that? Just how you feel about what you did back then to what you see now?
It's just beyond. I mean, it's way more than I can. Like I said, I'm a let's get the job done guy, but I don't have the I didn't go I didn't go to urban planning school the way they did at MIT, and Bill Traynor is a fellow at was it the Loeb fellow at Harvard. They focused on that. They knew the landscape, but when they need things, I know how to form entities. I know how to do. I do know how to do real estate. I know how to make things happen. So that I do the legal part of it. But it is, it's like having a child. It's like having a child and see the child, really kind of blossom into something
and make you proud.
Right. Yeah. So I am very proud and very, connected, and I would fight, I would fight on behalf of Lawrence Community Works at the drop of a hat if necessary. And I prefer not to fight.
That's a very appropriate, having community, not only having Lawrence, but having community in their name, because they're very much about strengthening the community, forming it, and it sounds like there's a role for everyone in Lawrence Community Work.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Planners and the doers like yourself. And,
and your Aunt Mary.
And my Aunt Mary.
That's right.
Yeah, this area, the whole city was dear to her, but especially this area, and I know.
She was an amazing woman.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
She used to walk when she was in her 80s.
Oh, yeah.
She used to walk from where she lived down to the Mary Immaculate Nursing Home and visit the people. My Auntie Sophie, the nun, I told you one of my sisters, one of my mother's sisters became a nun. And she was in there, in the nursing home section when she was failing. And, and Mary would walk to go visit her. Unbelievable.
She never got her license. My Aunt Mary never drove.
Oh, really?
She never drove.
Just like my Auntie Flora.
She traveled all over the world. and
Wow, God bless her.
yeah, walked everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she was a valuable resource at Lawrence Community
Yeah,
Works.
it's nice to see her in the pictures
Yeah.
and newspaper articles.
Yeah.
With you and Jess and Tamar and Maggie and
Yeah.
Kristen early on.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
It's really such a growth and of
Yeah.
an organization, and continues to do so much for the city.
Yeah. That's why I asked you about JEPU, because, you know, I'm really
Right.
proud of the fact that, you know, not only do we have 70 units of affordable housing in the old Ippolito building, the Duck Mill,
Yeah.
but also on the first floor. That's really a cool restaurant,
Oh, it's beautiful.
you know, and it's
Yeah.
well run, and it's, you know, that's something to be proud of too.
Definitely.
And I'd like to support that family that's running that restaurant. You know, I try to mention it to people. you know.
Right, it's hard to start a small business anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, they seem to be doing very well.
I know.
Yeah. Do you have a building or a project now on the horizon with Lawrence Community Works that you wanted to talk about? Or?
Well, we have a couple of things in the pipeline. I mean, a few actually, but I mean, you know, what's currently Ultimate Window, the Ultimate Window site. That's going to be our Island Park side. You know, because there's a park next to it and it's on the island, so it's called Island. There's going to be the Island Parkside project, 80 units of housing there. Yeah, and a really nice design to really maximize open space.
Yeah.
And then, you know, what's the Dye Works building, which is connected to the Southwick building where we have Union Crossing, that low one-level thing.
Right.
We're looking to do some type of a grocery store in there.
Nice.
Yeah, so that, but nothing's easy.
Right.
Nothing is easy.
No, it's not.
Everything is so complicated, and so we're working on that. And at the same time, we purchased, you know, the Mariner building, which is part of Malden Mills,
Right.
and just what we had to pay in fire watch there.
Oh, wow.
$12,000 a week. Yeah, $12,000 a week that we had to pay to the city of Lawrence.
Vigilance, is that what?
Yeah, because when we didn't have electricity there, we couldn't. The sprinkler systems wouldn't work, so they had to have a man on site
goodness.
round the clock, and we had to pay for it.
Wow.
Yeah, so that adds to the purchase price
Yeah,
significantly.
Wow.
So I mean, you know, nothing. When I say nothing is easy, like that's so easy to say,
Yes.
but it's reflective of something that's like, you know.
Yeah, so much
I
has
mean,
to fall into
and when you think of the fact that Amazon doesn't pay taxes and
Yeah.
the piece of shit in the White House doesn't pay taxes,
Right.
it's, you know,
It's infuriating.
yeah.
But I'm glad that it.
Just for the record, since this is part of posterity, I'll say that I was at an immigration march and I made up a chant, which went over pretty well, and it goes like this: the devil took a dump and he named it Donald Trump.
Where was the march? Was it the one in Lawrence? A few
Yeah,
years ago?
a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, that's so I just put myself out there. So
Yeah. That's
I mean, it is what it is.
Mhm.
I can say what it's a free country. I can say whatever I want, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
But it's disgusting, you know, that there's billionaires. To me, it's disgusting
Yeah.
that there's billionaires, and you know, I mean, I don't know.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, I guess we'll wrap up. Do you have any?
Well, I was curious to know what do you see in the future of Lawrence, and I mean, maybe you want to think about, maybe you're thinking about your legacy, but not necessarily about your impact, but also what do you see in the future for the city with it's not the LRA now, but it's the Lawrence Redevelopment Authority, is that right?
Yeah, that's the LRA,
so
but
LRA
they're good people now.
Right.
It's constituted by good people who have vision and who have, you know, a great consultant, and you know, Maggie Superchurch. You know, it's a lot different than, you know, what it was before. But you know, there is, you know, first of all, there's the danger of gentrification, you know, which would potentially, again, in a different way, dispossess people, you know. So there's trying to strike a balance between beautiful, you know, vibrant revitalization and without making the prices, without pricing people out of the market so that you have gentrification. That's somewhat of a concern. The other concern I have, I'm looking at right out that window, and that's Holy Rosary School.
Yes.
in the early 2000s, Lawrence Community Works succeeded in getting a QZAP grant. Grant means we don't have to pay it back. $4.9 million to turn the Holy Rosary School into a middle school based upon having canvassed the neighborhood and determined that that's what the neighbors want. That's what the community felt was needed. And we found the money to have it done. But Mike Sweeney, who was a city councilor, led the charge to kill it. And he was able to get Kevin, one of the Blanchette brothers, I forget which, Patrick Blanchette, but I forget, he was able to get him to side with him, and somehow they managed to kill that.
Why? Do you know? What was their reasoning?
I think it's because they you know, my thinking is because they didn't want to give Wilfredo Laboy anything. They didn't want to increase his empire because they felt that he was not a you know, worthy superintendent, and they didn't want to add to his domain. But I don't know. I've never had a beer with those guys. You know, I mean, you know, so. There was a time when, you know, when Mike Sweeney and I actually played basketball with us a few times, and with Pedro Arce and Bill Traynor and me, and you know, so, but he revealed himself to be of a different mindset, you know, to me. As a matter of fact, when we passed the RGO, the River Viendo Gateway Overlay District, okay?
Was that in, what year was that?
I can't remember, but that's easy to look up. Yeah. That's the zoning change.
Yeah.
And when we passed that thing, it's Sweeney had stood up. He was a city councilor, and he made us change the parking dimensions. He made us, you know, increase the parking to beyond what's necessary. And we know, because we can tell by the Duck Mill and by other developments, you don't need, you know, 1.5 but depending on the number of, you know, bedrooms, you don't need as much as he insisted on. Right. So he made us increase that, and he reduced the minimum percentage of affordability from 20% to 10%. We still do way more than that, but right. Somebody else could come in and satisfy the RGO requirement with only 10% because of that amendment that he did. He was just, that's the way he, you know, rolled. And, you know, I mean, different people, now he's in charge of the mass lottery, yeah. You know, so good luck to him. You know,
right.
I
so
mean,
you had to return the grant money then.
Yeah, we never got it.
Right.
We never got it. We couldn't get the approval necessary. And if it was $4.9 million in like 2004, yeah. By now it's probably going to be $8 million. Yeah. You know.
Yeah. Does the city?
And where are you going to find an economic engine that would justify that? You know, you can't. Whenever you develop something, you need to figure out what's the economic engine that's going to make this thing run. Right. You know, and it's like, I mean, it's a really wonderful place for pigeon shit right now, you know?
Yeah. Does the city own it? City of Lawrence?
The city owns it. You could buy it for $1.
That's what I seem to hear.
Yeah, you could buy it for $1, but if you buy it for $1, you're going to have to fulfill the covenants that will go, the deed will say that you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Right. Where are you going to get the money to do X, right. Y, and Z?
And
so nobody's going to...
There's a hole in the roof the size of a car.
So if that's all, that's a big deal. A hole in the roof, right. You can fix a hole in the roof. Yeah. I'm not worried about that. But yeah, that's why I say the pigeons, and I'm sure falcons go in there and kill pigeons. Yeah. So there's probably not only pigeon shit, but dead pigeons, you know. But right. Anyway. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really awesome hearing you talk and sharing your story once again. And,
oh, well.
I'm actually going to bring my students out to the North Common and explore a little bit the the urban renewal era and and up to modern day.
I'm happy to join in if you would like.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's such an important part of the city's history, and it's so recent that I wonder if people don't know about it, or maybe take for granted
people don't know
the fight that people only 30, 40 years ago did.
Right.
And how if you and others said it's not my fight or took your hands away when it got hard, just imagine how would the city have been different.
Yeah.
So all that work you did and carrying on your father's legacy, I mean, you should be so proud of what you see today when you look around
Well,
and the people you've affected.
And my mother went to Holy Rosary School too. And I want to leave, we're talking about my father, but my mother's
Yes.
devotion and, like you better not, like sometimes I'm afraid if I do the wrong thing now I'll get a slap from heaven from my mother too. So it came from both sides. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that she gets her props
Yeah.
because she was an amazing woman as well. But,
and she lives on with you and all you've done, and that's such a tremendous reason why we're honoring you with the Dengler Award and incorporating the legacy of your parents, because you've touched the city in such a profound way.
Well, I hope so.
And
Well,
it really, you fought, and it's coming through, and the city will just get better and better thanks to the building blocks that you set and that your father set.
thank you. Well, hope
so I
to.
think we'll wrap up this
Okay.
interview, and
All right.
I thank you for making yourself available
My
and
pleasure.
sharing
Yeah.
your knowledge of the history that you lived through. And
Yeah.
so this will complete the oral history for the Lawrence History Center. Thank
Okay.
you, Armand.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.